Welcome to the FIDE World Cup, where Magnus Carlsen with the white pieces takes on Vladimir Fedoseev. Carlsen kicks things off with e4, and we are in for a sharp and fascinating battle between two top grandmasters. We see the Caro-Kann defense, and Carlsen chooses the advance variation, immediately staking a claim in the center. Both sides develop their pieces naturally, with white enjoying a small space advantage. The players trade pawns in the center, and the queens come out for a brief moment before retreating. Knights and bishops maneuver for position as the strategic complexity of the middle game begins to build. Carlsen begins to build a serious initiative on the king side. His knight hops to g3, and then comes the pawn storm with h4, immediately challenging black's light-squared bishop. In response to the pressure, Fedoseev plays pawn to h6, but this is a slight inaccuracy. There was a much more challenging reply that would have kept the balance. The pawn pushes forward to h5 immediately. Black could then expand on the queen side with b4. The bishop drops back to b6, and after bishop to e3, the knight develops to a6, and black's position is perfectly solid. But in the game, the move is pawn to h6, and this gives Carlsen a chance to ramp up his attack. Carlsen immediately pushes his pawn to h5, but surprisingly, this isn't the most precise move. It lets Fedoseev off the hook and gives back some of the advantage. Black's bishop is forced to retreat to h7. Carlsen wastes no time, swinging his queen over to g4 to renew the pressure on the king side. And here, under pressure, Fedoseev makes an awkward defensive choice. Instead of developing, he shuffles his king, but there was a much better way to solve his problems. The bishop could have come out to f5. After the knight takes, the knight recaptures. White develops the bishop to e3, and black is perfectly safe to castle kingside. Back in the real game, the king shuffles uncomfortably to f8, and white's advantage begins to grow. Carlsen castles kingside, bringing his king to safety and connecting the rooks. He centralizes his knight, while black develops and creates a beautiful outpost for his own knight on f5. Carlsen decides to resolve the tension, capturing the strong knight on f5. And what a fantastic reply! The bishop recaptures on f5, the only move that keeps black right in the thick of this fight. Any other recapture would have been serious trouble. The queens reposition, eyeing weaknesses in the enemy camp. Black's bishop is forced back once more, and Fedoseev generates counterplay by pushing his pawn to c5. White's bishop develops to d2, but this is a slip. It gave black a golden opportunity to seize the initiative by targeting the d4 pawn, but Fedoseev misses it. The rook slides to d8, which is also an inaccuracy, failing to find the most precise way to punish white's last move. Carlsen renews his attack, pushing the f-pawn to create a major threat. Fedoseev responds by maneuvering his knight to a fantastic outpost on e3, right in the heart of white's position. Here, Magnus plays queen to f3, a move that lets his advantage slip away. He had a much stronger continuation that would have kept black under immense pressure. The queen could have swung to h3. After an exchange of pawns on f5, the knight recaptures, then another trade on f5, and the rook takes, maintaining a crushing attack. But in the game, queen to f3 is played, and this allows black a chance to trade pieces and equalize. A flurry of exchanges erupts on the f5 square. Knights and bishops are traded off, and when the dust finally settles, white emerges with a very dangerous passed pawn on d5. Black is under pressure again, and the passive king to g8 is an inaccuracy. The best defense was to be active and create counter-threats. The queen could have shot out to h4. After queen to f4, black's queen snaps up the pawn on h5. White takes on e6, and after the recapture, black has won a pawn and is right back in the game. Instead of finding that resource, the king just shuffles to g8, allowing white to increase the pressure. White pushes the passed pawn to d6, which looks terrifying, but it's not the most precise move. Carlsen is still winning, but there were even stronger ways to proceed. Black's queen now becomes a major nuisance on h4, creating threats of its own. Carlsen responds calmly, preparing with pawn to b3 and queen to e2, and this is a decisive error. Queen to g4 looks tempting, but it walks right into a stunning tactical blow from the world champion. A safer developing move was required. The bishop could have come out to g4. After queen to e4, the queen moves to g5. White plays pawn to a4, and black meets it with a6, keeping the position tenable. But after the move played, queen to g4, Magnus Carlsen unleashes his attack. And here it is, a brilliant sacrifice. Rook takes the bishop on f5. This move rips open black's position, deflecting the queen. Fedoseev has little choice but to accept, and the queen captures the rook on f5. Now Carlsen methodically builds a net. The rook comes to f1, the bishop to d2, and the queen returns to g4, tightening the screws around black's exposed king. Black plays pawn to a6, but this move does nothing to solve the critical problems on the king side. A better defensive move was needed to prepare for the coming storm. Queen to c8 was the best try. After pawn to a4, the queen could retreat to e8. White continues with a5, but black has time to bring the bishop back to d8 to defend. But in the game, pawn to a6 is played, and this allows another unbelievable sacrifice. Unbelievable! A second brilliant rook sacrifice. Rook takes the pawn on f7, completely demolishing black's kingside defenses. The king is forced out into the open, capturing the rook on f7. Carlsen follows up, grabbing the pawn on e6 with check. It's still completely winning, but a tiny slip in an otherwise perfect attack. Black's king has no choice but to retreat to f8. Another check arrives on f5. White's advantage is still overwhelming, but again, not the most clinical continuation. The hunted king shuffles back to the e8 square, and Carlsen delivers another check with the queen to g6. The king returns to f8, and this is a serious error. It allows White's e-pawn to become the hero of the game, a move which will win a full rook. Carlsen repeats checks, moving his queen from f5 to g6, forcing Black's king back and forth while he prepares the final decisive blow. King back to f8. In a terrible position, this is actually a great defensive try, and the only move to prolong the game, but the attack is just too strong. And there it is. The pawn storms forward to e6, and Black's entire defensive structure collapses. Black is forced to block the check with the queen, moving it to f6. And now, the third brilliant move of the game. The pawn takes the rook on d7, a stunning sacrifice to deflect the defending queen. Fedoseev has no choice but to capture the white queen on g6. White's pawn recaptures on g6. A great move, and the only one. This secures a winning endgame, as Carlsen is now up a full rook. The rest is a masterclass in conversion. White's king activates, and the pieces coordinate perfectly to shut down any desperate attempts at counterplay from black. And bishop to g4 is a fantastic, quiet move that completely puts an end to all of black's hopes. Here's the point. If black tries rook to h6, white simply takes the rook. After the pawn recaptures, the bishop moves to f5, and white wins even more material. Black makes a last-ditch effort with a pawn push on the queen side, but white's king simply walks up to f3, unfazed. And the pawn push to b4 is the final decisive mistake. This move loses on the spot, as white's king is now free to join the attack. Carlsen simply captures the free pawn on b4. Black recaptures the pawn on b4, but the position is completely hopeless and the game is over. And at this point, with his position in absolute ruins and down a rook, Vladimir Fedoseev resigned. A spectacular attacking game by Magnus Carlsen, featuring 3 brilliant sacrifices, gives him the win. Here is the simple win that Fedoseev saw. White's king marches up to f4. Black can push a pawn, but it's meaningless. The king continues to f5. Another pawn push does nothing, and now bishop to g5 will mop up black's remaining pieces, and there is no defense.